To complete our lavender rose, our lavender fields painting, I'm just finishing up putting in some the illusion of lavender rose on top of some already dry kind of watered down purple. And then what I'm going to be working on next, and I'm going to try not to get this top row of purple wet because I'm going to be applying green to that area. Just like in my picture, I'm going to be showing that little line of trees. And those trees are way off into the distance. And then there's one single tree that has lots of details and is really large off into that distance. So I'm going to be working on that today. All right, so that went really, really quickly, making those little lavender rows back there. There's nothing really special about it other than just making it look like rose. Now, when it comes to details for this tree, I'm going to be using what's called a stipple technique. And I'm going to just very, very lightly touch the paper with a little bit of green, blue-green, yellow-green, and maybe some green mixed with a little bit of brown, okay? And what I'm doing here is I'm going to give the illusion of a light source, which is coming in from the right-hand side. How do I do that? I am looking at this little yellow highlight over here on that tree. That's a really good thing to pay attention to with any painting that you're doing. Where is the light source? So I'm going to initially start with just a little bit of green, and I'm just going to touch the tip of my brush to the surface, and I'm just doing a very little dot, and I call that a stipple, which is usually a drawing term, but I like to use that term when talking about painting. So over on the right-hand side, I'm going to have a little bit darker tone, and what is going to look like in this picture, little leaves on the tree. And you try not to rush. If you try not to touch, make it all one big giant circle, please try not to do that because that does look kind of unnatural. So what I'm going to do is try to make it look a little bit more random as opposed to the picture where the tree looks like a giant circle. I'm going to adjust that a little bit so that my tree has a little bit more of a natural shape. This is my painting that I did last time I had this demonstration. I'm the one that made that tree. I'm looking at it with a little bit more of a critical eye of, that tree looks like a giant circle, and I'm just trying to make some adjustments. I'm also going to go in with that light green or the yellow-green color over on the left-hand side to give it that light source. And I'm just very, very lightly touching that yellow. I may have to let some of this dry before I can go in with some more of the details. And then I can really go in with some more colors there. I'm going to go ahead and paint in the trunk, even though I used a green. I touched it with a little tiny bit of brown. And now the next thing that I'm going to do is that greenery along that horizon line. Oops, got to rinse my brush. I'm going to go in with a little bit of a blue-green because I want it to be a little bit darker. And I'm right at that horizon line with near where the horizon line is. And I'm just real lightly touching my brush with a stipple motion where I'm just touching the tip of my brush to the paper and giving what looks like little dots of paint. And then one of the things that we'll do once that green is all dry is we're going to paint in those mountains in the distance. And what I'm going to do a little bit differently this time as opposed to that first painting I did is those mountains aren't going to look identical. Like, I have 5 different mountains that look the same. the picture I was looking at, that's the way it looked, but I'm going to change it up this time to make it look a little bit more natural. And why I'm going to do that is because it just doesn't appear the way it does in nature. In nature, you would see mountains that have different heights, and that's just my opinion. So for right now, I'm just going to finish up all of these little bushes in the middle ground, and then I'm going to move on to those mountains. Again, if I have wet paint right here, I can't paint those mountains in. So while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to go ahead and work on some clouds in the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and let this part dry for right now before I do those mountains. And I'm going to add in a little bit darker blue. I'm going to use the wet on wet technique, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to my paper first before I move into adding any of the pigment. So I'm just painting regular water, and I'm trying not to touch that tree. And I'm just going to give, oops, I touched a little bit of that green, no big deal. I can always lift that off with a paper towel. And now I'm going to touch the blue and watch it spread across my paper. And now I'm giving what looks like some clouds off into the distance, or variation to my colors. All right, see what I did there? So now it doesn't look like all one color. I'm giving some variation. And then I'm going to add a little bit more yellow up here in the top corner. And what that yellow is going to do is just, show the illusion of a little bit of sunlight peeking through. I don't want a big ball for the sun. Please don't do that. But I'm going to give the illusion. And right now I'm feeling like the paint is spreading a little too much. So I'm going to grab a paper towel. And I'm going to do a lift. And watch what happens. Whoopsie. And I'm just blotting some of that because it was too heavy, too much color. And then I'm going to go back in with the colors that I want to see. And now I'm going to wait for my paper to dry just a little bit so that as I want to do new colors, it's not going to continue bleeding across the paper. While I'm waiting, I'm going to go ahead and work a little bit more on those lavender fields. And this time I'm going to go in with a little bit of red violet. Just a tiny bit, just to give some color variation. Now I'm going in with a more of a blue violet, and I'm just real lightly touching the surface, and I'm just giving little teeny tiny details in here. I'm not doing anything special, just kind of lightly grazing the surface of the paper with the tip of my brush. So what most people have hopefully learned with this activity is to be able to as opposed to what most students do, you are learning to use just the tip of your brush and to control your paint, which is the number one thing that you need to learn when it comes to watercolor painting. Being able to control how much water you have on your brush and how much paint. As I've looked around my classroom, I can see that all of you have understood exactly what I was teaching and have made beautiful paintings. So you should be real proud of yourself. All right, now it's looking like my paper's a little bit more dry. I'm gonna go ahead and do a little more detail up on the top while the lavender dries, and I'm gonna work on this tree. I'm not liking this little spot in here. Gonna wet that down a little bit and do a lift. And that fixed it right up. Now, if you have any white space in your paper, you want to make sure that that white space starts to disappear. If it means that you're adding a little bit more paint, you're not really supposed to see white spaces on your paper. So my advice would be, before you finish this off, that you take a little time to add a tiny bit of pigment into the areas where you see white paper. I'm going to add just a little bit more brown to the greens, especially in this area, to give it a little bit more of a trunk for the tree. And now I'm going to do the last detail, which is going to be a darker blue mixed with purple. And I'm going to paint in my mountains. I guess I'm going to add a little bit of all of those colors to put my mountains in the distance. I have a little green in there, a little blue, a little purple. All right, and now I'm feeling like I am pretty close to done. Gonna add just another little touch of yellow. A little more yellow to my tree.
Control yourself.
Hush. And now I'm just going to add a little touch of yellow to everything in here. And what that's going to do is give a little bit of illusion of that light source, that sun that's peeking through over on the side. So I'm adding just a touch of yellow.
Reaction to the industrial.
I'll win.